Okay, we ready to start? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carmel Nipus, and I am Cando Certification Coordinator. I just wanted to let you all know that this session is being recorded. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Cando, we are a nonprofit Indigenous organization that is membership driven and overseen by a board of directors. And we focus on community economic development and are constantly looking for new and innovative ways to offer training opportunities and capacity development to First Nations across Canada. A copy of this webinar will be available afterwards and with a follow-up email, and there will be a survey link provided too. And at the end of the week, there will be a draw, and 2 winners will be selected for a chance to win $400 each. So we do encourage you to leave, we ask you to leave your mics on mute during the presentation, and we encourage you to use the chat box to ask any questions. And some of the first questions that we have for you is if you could just share with us in the chat box where you live and if you know someone who works or has worked in the mining or mineral exploration. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker. It is Bert Mercer, and he is actually a member of our board of directors, and he oversees Northern British Columbia. So Bert, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and a little bit about your mining experience.
Okay, thank you, Carmela. As Carmela mentioned, my name is Bert Mercer. I'm the manager for economic and business development for the Nisga'a Nation through Nisga'a government. And currently right now our Nisga'a lands that we actually own are about 2,250 square kilometers. But because of our treaty and our constitution, we control in our NAS area 26,000 square kilometers. And within those 26,000 square kilometers, there's about 27 mining and exploratory companies. And one of the bigger ones that we have an impact benefits agreement with is Seabridge Gold, which owns the KSM project, and they have a new CEO and president based out of Toronto. And they're going to be putting in $73 million this year from their investments. Some of the work that has to be done, they're looking for and the Nisga'a Nation has a MOU with the TelTan Nation because they buffer up against our territories in northern BC, right where the Golden Triangle is. But with Seabridge Gold, they're looking for line cutters, fallers, buckers, pad builders, environmental stuff, camp services, and all that stuff's going to be put in this year. But we also have a Nisga'a crew that works for Dolly Barden Silver, who's doing mining and exploratory work up at the Anyoks area. And the crew there is combined of from my aunt, we have 3 fallers that are in there. Normally they'll start getting ready in April, and then they go into camp and they live up in the mountains to do pad building. And I think they're probably going to be doing up to 60 pads this year. It's just on drilling and exploratory work. One of the things that we really like to do is identify the opportunities, subcontracting, and business capacity. That's the stuff that we kind of look for when we look at our impact benefits agreements, and also revenue streams. But what really key for the IBAs is we find that just to make the principal contractor or the owner to make sure that they're following the what's built into the IBAs is to have a monitor on site that is from the Nisga'a, so that they can measure their KPIs and everything else like that. It's really an excellent opportunity. So the key is to look for all the employment opportunities, exploration, construction, and operations phases. But we do a lot of work up there. We meet with a lot of companies in Vancouver. and then it gets really busy. But yeah, that's just a summary of how we do work with the mining companies and our partners up north.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bert, for your for joining us today. Yeah, and if anybody does have any questions, feel free to use that chat box. So I'd like to move on to introduce our main speaker. So we do have Dave Lefebvre, and Dave has more than 30 years of experience with government geoscience surveys and mineral exploration companies. An economic geologist, he is knowledgeable about a wide variety of industrial mineral and coal deposits. So Dave, if the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carmel. Thanks, Bert. Always good to hear about what's happening up in Nisga'a territory, and part of British Columbia we call the Golden Triangle, which has been an active area for a number of decades. I lived in Smithers in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and it was a very busy area at that time as well. The Golden Triangle, which is to the northwest of Smithers in BC. So my name's Dave Lefebvre. I am a geologist, and I'm speaking to you today from Salt Spring Island near Vancouver Island. It's part of the ancestral and unceded territory of the Salish peoples. And it's within the traditional territories of the Hul'qumi'num and Senkotan speaking peoples of this area. Before I actually start talking, I'm going to show you a rock hammer. It's my rock hammer. It's what a geologist would take out with them in the field. And now I'm not spending nearly as much time in the field, hardly any, as a matter of fact, but I spent many days and weeks and months working in the field when I was more active as a field geologist. But I'm showing it to you today because I'm going to actually talk a bit about prospectors. And the way a geologist uses a hammer is they hit a few special things, rocks they see and different things they see. If I was a prospector, I would hit probably about 10 times as many things with my rock hammer. And prospectors, for that reason, have in the past found a lot of the mines that were developed in British Columbia, and they're very effective at discovering things. So now that we're looking for things at depth, they're not finding as many. I'm just going to put my headphones on here so you can hear me clearly as I go on. There. So Carmel will tell me if I'm not clear. So I need to give you share the screen. Give you the presentation. Okay, so just to be clear, we're going to be talking about mining equals opportunity for Indigenous communities in British Columbia. And I have been fortunate enough to do workshops in quite a few communities, Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities around British Columbia over the last couple of decades. And but this is my first experience this morning and this afternoon with doing webinars. So you'll get to see how well I do with that. Most of us would realize that Indigenous peoples have had a long connection with minerals. That's certainly true for British Columbia. They were the first explorers and had a really keen eye for finding things. These could have been stone. In BC, obsidian with the TelTans. They had some very special obsidian that got traded as far away as Alaska and Florida in prehistoric times. They recovered copper nuggets and built some of these fabulous shields, which were highly prized and culturally important. So why talk about mining? I've got 4 reasons for you why we should talk about mining. One is jobs and contracts. Mining is the #2 employer of Indigenous people in Canada. Who's #1, might you guess? Well, it's actually government, particularly the federal government, and Indigenous governments. There are numerous agreements with Indigenous communities. I'll show you a little bit about that, but I'm going to talk more about the potential for what EDO should be certainly interested in, which is economic development. Another reason why it's important is mines are spread across British Columbia. And again, we'll try and show you a bit about that. They're remote, they're in remote and rural and some suburban locations that we think of sand and gravel pits. The other part is we're assuming that, at least for some of you, not people like Bert, the mining sector is not that well known. And many people have never visited a mine or learned about them. So we're hoping that we can provide you with an entry into this interesting sector. It's all about, for an economic development officer, I would say, is trying to not miss economic development opportunities that might be out there. And certainly the Nisga'a and the TelTan and a number of First Nations in British Columbia have been very successful at working with the mining sector to develop economic opportunities. So in British Columbia, there's a total of 38,000 jobs in the mineral sector. And there are high net levels of major mines employing Indigenous people. In the New Gold mine near Kamloops, the percentage of Indigenous workers is around 25 to 30% of the total workforce there. And we have other mines that have had numbers between, I would say, 15 and 30% for employment. These jobs can actually be quite attractive and build work skills. And so you often on a larger mine site, you can progress from a job requiring less skill, get the training, and advance to one that has more training. There's a wide variety of these jobs, and these are just a picture of some of them, the ones that are available in British Columbia, and so that makes it attractive both for getting employment, but also learning different skills. If we look at mines, there actually is far larger variety of mine jobs than you might have thought. You can see that, yes, there's sort of the traditional mine worker, in this case in an underground setting in the picture on the left, but there's the mills and the shops where they have apprentices and certified trades and training, but then there's offices with admin and the secretarial. There's a camp if it's in a remote location. And again, if it's in a more remote location, there's going to be roads that have to be maintained. So we're looking at over 160 different types of jobs related to mining for a larger mine. And so that's a lot of scope for employment. We can also talk about goods and service contracts. These mines require a wide variety of goods. Could be food, could be gravel, could be signs or pickets. And mines will often contract out specific services, rather thinking of it something that's a bit intermittent or they think can be delivered more effectively by an external contractor. So security, snow removal, transportation are all things that an Indigenous company could bid on. Companies of various sizes do bid on these contracts. Obviously, if you're making, there's a company I heard of in Ontario that was just making pickets that they were using before to mark their blast holes. And so there was a local company providing those pickets. And then that goes along with many mines preferring to use local companies, and particularly recognizing the value of using Indigenous companies that are local. A couple of examples, and throughout this presentation, I'm going to try and show you some examples of First Nations from British Columbia working with industry or individual entrepreneurs working with them. TelTan Nation has been quite effective at building a relationship with the mining industry. They developed in 1985 this TelTan Nation Development Corporation, or TNDC. They started building homes with that. But in 1988, they were able to negotiate the first impact and benefit agreement between a First Nation and a mine in British Columbia. And they got a contract that required them to build help build a 160-kilometer long road with 3 years of a 3-year contract. They got a 5-year open pit mining contract. They got work building the settling ponds. They got general camp maintenance, and they got what was quite a significant commitment at that time, a minimum of the 10% 20% of the workforce at the mine site were to be TelTans from the TelTan Nation. And what's important in there, particularly important there, is that because these contracts were for 3 and 5 years, they could purchase or lease equipment and build up their fleet of equipment, knowing that they would be getting income coming from it by supporting the mine. They actually continued to do that work until that mine closed for more than that 5-year period. But that allowed them to really get going. They initially focused on construction for the mining industry, but then they were able to expand it to local road construction in northwestern BC, hauling gravel, and they built quite a fleet of vehicles based on doing that work. They've also developed more than 20 joint ventures that are directly related to servicing mining industry. Like they have a drilling company, they have a blasting company, often in a joint venture, which they control, but which is with a non-Indigenous company to bring the expertise. We look at the mining community active mining agreements across Canada, and you can see on the left here, they can be impact benefits agreements shown in red, or they can be a socio-economic agreement, or just an expiration agreement. So there's a variety of them, but this is a federal government site. The website is given at the bottom there. And you can see these are all the current ones across Canada. If we look at British Columbia, it stands out as one of the busier areas in the country for these type of agreements. And I would say that's in part because we've seen some strong leadership by First Nations in different parts of British Columbia, including the Nisga'a, including the TelTan, and other First Nations. I'm going to show you one that relates to the New Gold mine near Kamloops I mentioned before. There were 2 agreements there, and it was involved the Kamloops Indian Band, or what was originally called the Kamloops Indian Band, and the Saskatchewan Band. And they signed, in 2008, they signed a new Afton Mine Participation Agreement with New Gold. This led to employment, education, and in 2000, as of 2017, 23% of the employees at New Afton site were Indigenous. In 2010, they signed the first economic community and development agreement with the BC government. So this is not with the company. This was with the BC government. It was the first one done in probably in Canada, but certainly in British Columbia, where the tax revenue, part of it went from the mine to the BC government, but part of it went to these 2 bands to support their various activities within their communities. And the mine started production in 2012. So you see the first agreement, both those agreements before the mine actually opened. And it was estimated at that time it might generate over the life of the mine about $30 million for the bands from this revenue sharing. And so since that time, there have been other First Nations that have been able to benefit from it. But we're not here to talk about agreements. We're more here to talk about economic development opportunities. These are other First Nations that now have revenue sharing agreements in British Columbia related to mines with the BC government. So where do we find mines in British Columbia? The large mines. Well, we have 2 types of large mines. We have steelmaking coal, which is found in the southeast and in the northeast, but south of sort of southwest of Dawson Creek and Fort St. John. They're large open pit coal mines producing coal that is shipped to overseas to make steel. It makes coke, which is a critical element. And then we have a much larger area throughout the province, which is where you can find metals, particularly copper, but sometimes with gold and sometimes with molybdenum. And they are also coal, and the coal and metal mines produce, as you'll see a little bit later, about the same value for the province. You ask me, what's molybdenum? Well, we call it moly for short. It's a critical metal. You can see that the spelling molybdenum down here. You can see it's used in hip joints. It's also used in jet turbines for airplanes. And these are both usages where you want that metal to be very strong and not fail. Last thing you want to have is you're up in the sky and your jet engine turbine fails to function. So these critical metals can be very, very important. And we have a number of mines that produce moly, usually as a second metal after copper. We have many mine products here. I've talked about the metals, and there's an open pit mine. It's the Red Chris mine in Northwest BC, the pits are larger now. It's taken from probably about 2 years ago. There are coal mines I mentioned. There are industrial minerals like limestone and different types of rock, gypsum in the province. And we have sand and gravel, and we still have some placer gold mines. That's British Columbia, the first mining that was developed, and the first colonialization was associated with prospectors chasing placer gold, and we still have a few of those. Mines are of many sizes. Many of the sand and gravel pits are actually quite small. And then you can see the largest open pit in Canada, the largest open pit in British Columbia, obviously, called Highland Valley Copper. And you can see the large pit here, and you can see some of the some of the waste rock around it. There you can see the placer gold locations shown in these areas here, where there is placer gold still found, or still being mined usually by families and relatively small production. Industrial minerals are found largely in the areas where we have good road infrastructure and in the south. And sand and gravel is pretty well everywhere, but it's only getting used where you're close to communities where you need to build roads and houses. So there would be gravel pits, for example, all the way up along this road that are used for building the road and used locally for supplying the communities up there. We have a wide variety of products that are produced in British Columbia, metals and coal. So there's the copper, gold, zinc, and silver, and molybdenum, which I mentioned. Then we have the steel making. We do produce a little bit of thermal coal. That is largely, that has dropped off, and we're assuming that along with across Canada, that thermal coal production will be completely finished in British Columbia, perhaps or finished by 2030, excuse me. There's minerals and rocks, limestone, gypsum. If you were to knock on your wall, you might not think of it, but in most places we're using wallboard. And 90% of what makes up wallboard is actually gypsum, sort of reconstituted to be used in this wallboard. So we do also have some interesting other stones and some jade production, and then of course the construction materials. Why is mining not well known? Well, part of this is it's not generally taught in schools. Many mines are in remote and rural areas, and that's good for that local community in terms of potential employment, but it does mean not a lot of people see it. Access to these industrial sites is usually restricted for safety reasons, and that's, again, that means that people may not actually see the operation. I should say at this point, mining is typically the safest heavy industry in Canada. In doing these webinars, one of the things I learned was that in Saskatchewan, it's actually safer to work in a mine in terms of lost time accidents than it is to work for the provincial government. Mining products are often processed to a metal or a mineral product. So we don't actually, by the time we get it, it's not like a gold coin. We're not necessarily thinking of the fact that it came from a mine. And I would say the mining sector at times has, they're focused on delivering the products, the mineral products that society needs, but does not necessarily tell people enough about what they're doing. And I'm just wondering whether I might surprise you a little bit with the highlights for the mining sector. So total production in 2020 was $9.3 billion worth of value. Most of that was, not most of it, about 43% was coming from coal, but you can see that copper was 26%. If we add it to gold, because those are the two primary metals, they're almost equivalent. And what we've been seeing over recent years is that more gold protection from these copper mines. And so we're seeing that metal value increase from British Columbia. And then we see a variety of other industrial minerals with a 5% are significant, and some aggregates, some moly and silver, etc. There are roughly 1,000 sand and gravel pits, so they're the most abundant, but there are 30 industrial mineral quarries, 9 metal mines, and 7 coal mines. And the big mines, remember, are both the coal and the metal mines. So now we go to questions, and I think Carmel will help me out with that.
Yeah, Dave, we don't have any questions right now.
Okay. Carmel,
Bert does.
Yes, good.
You can share that PowerPoint I sent to you It just explains the steps and what we take when we're looking at mining.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bert.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Okay, well then I'll just keep going. What I would suggest again is now, Carmel, just, do we know how many people we have from southern BC versus northern BC? Is that available? Did people did you get some responses on that? Remember, we were asking, we'll come back to that, but we were kind of curious to know from the participants, if you could in the chat box put whether you're from southern BC, and that would generally be sort of south of Prince George and going across to Terrace, and then Terrace and Prince Rupert. So if you live in Prince George, Terrace, Prince Rupert, and north, that'll be northern BC. Otherwise, you're in southern BC. And if you're from elsewhere in Canada, you might mention that. And we're also curious to know whether it's how many of you know somebody who's worked in as a miner or worked in mining, just to give us an idea as to what audience we have here today.
Yeah, Dave. So Michael, who joined us earlier, thanks for joining us again this afternoon, Michael. He's from southern BC.
All right, good. Glad to hear it. Welcome. I'll keep going then, and if we look forward, there will be another question and answer session at the end. So mining opportunities can come with concerns, and so I'm here to talk about opportunities, not when I do a full day workshop, then we have a chance to explore other aspects rather than this focus in this sort of less than an hour and a half session to focus on opportunities. But it's important for you as an economic development officer to be aware of the fact that particularly large mines are large industrial operations, and that it's important to understand that with these larger industrial operations, there can be concerns or challenges. And I put up here that BC has imposed an interim ban on resource development to protect caribou in the Northeast and the Southeast, which the date on that is 2019. So we're coming up to that 2-year interval, and they're trying to work out ways to help the caribou population. What I would encourage you to do is always ask questions and learn about mining if you get involved, and don't be afraid to ask the challenging or the tough questions so you understand it better. I guess I would say with that, I think as an economic development officer, you often end up as being in between, perhaps explaining something to your community and understanding that particular sector where the economic development opportunity lies. So the government role in exploration and mining, the provincial and territorial governments are responsible for administering most of the aspects related to mining. They administer the mineral claims, they regulate the exploration activities, they have geological surveys that generate maps and reports that help explorers know where to go. They provide the permits for mine developments, and then more permits for when the mines actually are going to start operating. They enforce the safety regulations and assist with mine training. And they require reclamation plans for the mines, which are all drawn up before the mine is permitted and starts being developed. And then they also require reclamation bonds where the companies have to provide funds that are set aside, held in the bank, and can only be released if and when the mine has been closed appropriately and reclaimed appropriately, and that's approved by the government. Otherwise, they sit there in case the company, while it does not properly reclaim the site. The federal government has a much more restricted involvement with mining due to the way confederations work. So they administer mineral rights on reserves. They can participate in environmental assessments of larger mine proposals where there's a concern that relates to them. In BC, that often relates to rivers and ocean-going fish, but it can be there are other items that can be of concern. And it doesn't impact us in BC, but if we think of Saskatchewan, where they have uranium mines, they're involved with uranium mining from the point of safety and transport. Restrictions on claim staking. I'm not going to talk a lot about the government aspects because we don't have a lot of time, but there's no staking on Indian reserves. Parks and some special protected areas cannot be staked on. Temporary areas under study by government can be withdrawn so that there can be no acquisition of the mineral tenure or what we call staking. Claim staking in BC is now online. Again, I'm not going to show you the details on that, but it does mean that anybody can use a computer to access and look online to see where people have staked claims and establish who owns those claims. Staking is allowed in private land, but there are more regulations to apply for claims in private land. And you need to have the permission of the private land holder to go on their land. It's worth noting that many mineral sector companies least exploring for metals will tend to avoid private land because of possible conflicts. I'm going to now talk about the life cycle of mining. I'm going to focus on prospectors a bit and expiration and on reclamation at the end, because I think those are areas that people may know less about than the mines, and we're restricted with the time we have. So there we can see two prospectors. They're out, they may have parked their truck, 500 meters away or a couple kilometers away, and they're out looking for outcrops, looking for rock, and looking for interesting metals or other minerals. Then we have mineral exploration, and more advanced mineral exploration will involve diamond drilling, and that's a drill with a road access. Then we see mine development. This is a tunnel going underground to access, so you can do more drilling, more exploration to decide whether you have a deposit you can turn into a mine. Then we have the mining, and then ultimately we have mine closure and reclamation, returning the site to as close as possible to its original use. This is what we would call the mining life cycle, and it's only in the last, since about 1973, that British Columbia has really emphasized that there needs to be good planning and good follow through in mine closure and reclamation. BC was actually ahead of a number of other jurisdictions around the world in that aspect. This whole life cycle provides Indigenous business opportunities, and so you do need to understand the activity to perhaps fully understand those opportunities. But there's mine closure and reclamation does provide a very interesting way to find work that's suitable for some Indigenous companies and communities. So there's prospecting. We're doing the mineral exploration path. We'll start with the prospector. Then they'll do geochemistry, and they'll go out and they may collect more, rock samples on the grid, or in this case, they're taking silt out of a stream. Some of the metal that might have been up on the hillside has been carried down in very small amounts. You analyze the silt, and it'll tell you somewhere upstream you might find metals. There's geophysics, which can lead to, it's a way of using specialized techniques to allow you to look into the earth to look for minerals or metals that might be conductive or have other characteristics that allows a geologist or a geophysicist to interpret that there's either an interesting rock formation or there's some interesting metal mineralization beneath the surface that warrants more study and usually drilling. And drilling is really the key tool now to deciding whether you have a deposit. And here I'm talking primarily about metals, including rare earths and critical minerals. When we talk about limestone quarries and sand and gravel, usually there's a better understanding of the geology and where they're located. And so it's more about the value of the resource and the quantity of the resource than actually having a challenge finding it. Prospectors. So there's a prospector at the top is from the Atland area, from the local First Nation with his father, who I presume was also perhaps a prospector before him. The other one is a prospector I know from central BC. They used to make all the discoveries of pretty well all the British Columbia metal, coal, and some of the industrial mineral deposits. But in recent years, as we've had more people have walked over the ground, it's becoming more in the realm of companies. They often work alone, spending their own money. They hike through the bush. Remember, I mentioned that they have the rock hammer, and that's a primary tool for them. They would have a GPS instrument as well as a gold pan with them as well. And they're hoping to sell their property to a company. That's how they make the money. There's a prospector I know who I've known from when I was working as a student early in the 70s. J. Paul Stevenson, and he prospected for a number of years in the 70s into the early 80s. Well, over time, he eventually became the CEO of a Vancouver-based exploration company that has a copper property near Princeton in southern BC. And he also was a Diamond Jubilee Award winner. And just to show that some prospectors can use that skill to advance further. Who does the exploration? We call it, they're small companies. We tend to call them junior companies. And there can be several to tens of full-time employees. They often have a single office. Vancouver is the exploration capital for the world. There's the most exploration companies based in Vancouver explore, not in British Columbia only, not in Canada only, but a lot of them explore globally. And there's about, the estimate currently is about 700 of these junior companies in Vancouver. Many of them do not own a mine, so they have no source of revenue. Their stocks will trade for cents or dollars, and they use that to raise investment. And many of them don't exist for more than 5 or 10 years. And here are some companies in sort of central to south central British Columbia: Barkerville Gold Mines, Sonar Resources, Yellowhead Mining Inc. And they would be junior companies working on advanced exploration, sometimes in early mine development. Here they're just collecting the silt samples I talked to you about and soil samples to do exploration. Here a geologist is out looking at his hand lens, using rocks to look at the rocks to find favorable areas. In some places, you're allowed to trench, use an excavator. You'll dig it out, and the one on the trench this is a historic trench, which they never reclaimed. This is a modern trench done in the last 25 years. They would keep the excavator on site. The geologists would map and sample the trench and then return all the soil and revegetate it. Here's an airborne geophysical survey, which is often done to collect data over a large area to help you understand the geology and perhaps find indication of a mineral deposit. Here's a ground geophysical survey. You're able to do it on the ground, so you get better penetration. You can sometimes look 300 or 400 meters below the Earth's surface to see certain features that might help you with exploration. So early exploration jobs, the picture is showing an exploration camp with a couple of visitors who were with me when I visited this camp. And there might often be a prospector for early exploration. There'd be some line cutters in BC, because you have to cut, in the past anyway, you used to cut trails, very narrow trails, which you use in a grid to locate yourself. Be samplers, or a geophysical crew, maybe a geologist. But then there's also, the drillers, a kitchen helper, a cook, camp expediter. Somebody might have set up the camp and then come and gone. So a lot of different types of work. Drilling in BC is often done using helicopters in the remote areas. A number of the pads that Bert was talking about for the Nisga'a are going to be building presumably would be for helicopter drill setups. So what are they doing when they drill? Think of it as you had a birthday cake and it was layered and had icing on the outside. So the icing could be maybe the soil on the top. You took a straw and you stuck it into the cake and it went down, and it was a solid straw, and the cake was layered. You'd see the different layers in it, and you could interpret what was inside the cake. Well, a drill hole is just doing the same thing, but you can see down here, the drill helpers pulling out the rock and putting it into the core box here. And the next picture, and it often gets cut so that you can have part of it to keep and part of it to analyze. So you can see a rock saw here. And then a geologist is going to describe or log the drill core, looking for visible gold, or looking for copper mineralization, or looking for signs that it may contain metals of interest. If you were drilling for coal, you would be looking for sections of coal which would be dark black or blackish brown in sections of more normal sedimentary rock. I've included this. I can't find anything online. I know Ann Bull from living in Smithers and also being up in the Northwest. She has built those core boxes. If we go back here, you have a big drill program. It's a small, it's a small company thing, but these are wooden core boxes they need, and they'll go through quite a few of them. So she's got a company. She does lots of other things, and she mentions the mining support as well. But she's obviously just been constructing wooden core boxes. It's a small enterprise, low capital cost started up. And I suspect she supplies one of the TelTan Blackhawk drilling company with their core boxes, but don't know that. all exploration requires government permits, except when the prospector's out there with their rock hammer and not doing any surface disturbance. They are allowed to walk over the terrain in as long as they're not on somebody else's ground, like a reserve or private property. But once you're doing any more advanced exploration, you need a government permit. Early exploration can be small camps. It's usually done by junior companies. They might be spending $50,000 annually, maybe in some cases millions of dollars, but typically $50,000, $100,000, $200,000. There are going to be summer field programs in BC, sometimes with winter drilling, and there is an opportunity for exploration services and community benefits, and there's generally limited environmental impacts with that early exploration. More advanced, larger number of people, more often going to be perhaps a larger company involved. Hundreds of $1 millions can be spent on those type of programs over years. Seabridge would be in that category. There would be other advanced ones that are not spending near that much amount of money. Field programs for multiple years and often year round. They are very significant opportunities for exploration services and obviously I've mentioned benefit agreements here. They can have more significant environmental impacts, which will depend on the type of deposit they're exploring for and its relationship to the rocks around it. So here's some advanced exploration companies. Here's SCS Diamond Drilling, is 10% First Nation owned. They like working with First Nations. They're keen on employment for First Nations, and they're based out of Kamloops and have been around for a while. You have Blackwater Camp Services by NASCO, Economic Development Corporation, sort of southwest of Prince George, and they will provide camps in remote locations, not just for mining, but for oil and gas logging, but mining, and you see they also put exploration, so identifying the two sectors. In the sort of terrace area, there's this, I need to pull this down. Sorry, just adjusting something on my screen here so I can see it a bit better. So Geel Enterprises Incorporated provides a lot of service. They build camps, they build drill pads, and they're a company, just an Indigenous company that is providing work to people in Northwest BC, exploration companies doing work. I'm going to show you a few reclamation, a little bit here for exploration. So one of the main concerns about exploration is roads in British Columbia in areas that are unroaded. And so this is a road built to get a drill in. They drill the holes, maybe several holes in an area down here, and then afterwards they have to reclaim it. And this is a bit dated photograph, so that the reclamation techniques tend to evolve as we move forward. But this is what they were doing about 10 years ago with reclamation of drill roads. Now we're going to talk about mine development. Who's doing it? Well, they're larger companies. They've got hundreds to tens of thousands of full-time employees, multiple offices. They are producing mines, which are generating money for them, and sometimes smelters, and the stocks trade for tens of dollars, if not more. And you can see Teck, these are three of the larger ones have involvement in British Columbia: Teck, Imperial Metals, and Rio Tinto. So if we go back to the mine development path, so we're beyond exploration. We've identified a resource. What are we going to do to sort of prove up to ourselves and prove to the government that this should go ahead as a mine? One of the first things is to continue doing environmental assessments so that you can monitor what the environment is like, what it was like before you started doing the mine development, and whatever changes you might be seeing that we need to be aware of. It could be a bulk sample. This is a picture actually from Saskatchewan, from a diamond play there. And all these are from large diameter drill holes where they sampled them to look and see where they could find diamonds. And then you need government permits. That can take quite a bit of time. Bert could probably tell us about that with some of the projects he's been involved with. They require economic feasibility studies. These companies are going to have to go to the marketplace to get investment dollars, and they have to provide information as to why people would give them large amounts of money to their companies to go ahead and develop a mine. and they also have to raise the funds. So you need to justify the funds, but then you actually have to go to a different group of people who actually are going to provide the funds. What they will be doing is they have to determine if the resource is economical to include. And so it's going to depend on the type of mineral. That's going to influence the value of the mineral, how it's going to be mined, what it needs to be processed to get it to a product you can then sell to a customer. The market price of the minerals and the metals. So commodity prices are, when their commodity prices are higher, it's much easier to raise the investment dollar. If the commodity prices drop too low, then the project could stall. Location, accessibility, size and value of the resource are all things that can affect the potential value of the deposit. If you have a deposit that's not near a road, it's going to have to be a lot richer to either develop a road if you can into that area or access it by air. Distance from markets and supply points is going to apply, particularly for things like industrial minerals and sand and gravel, because they tend to be heavier and the shipping costs are more. The regulatory regime, if the taxes are deemed to be non-competitive with other jurisdictions, it could mean that that resource is not economic unless it's very rich. They obviously need to be environmentally safe and socially responsible mining proposed and able to be delivered. Otherwise, the more knowledgeable investors are going to say, no, this is not the right investment for myself. And they do need a qualified workforce to deliver. So I'm going to show you, I've chosen because it's a shorter presentation to show you one major mine that's now in production, but was in between about 2010 to 12. It had seen lots of exploration before that, but became a mine development project. It's located in northwestern BC in TelTan territory, and I happen to have some pretty good pictures to show you here. So the bottom picture here, as you can see, they in bringing it up the highway, they have these very big mine trucks they're going to use in this open pit mine. They had to come on pieces, and so the part of the truck came here, and the other part's not showing. They've then assembled the trucks on site. And here's their mill they're building, which will be actually used. They'll bring the rock out of the mine. In this case, there's small amounts of copper and gold and sometimes moly in that rock. They crush up the rock and separate the rock from the metals in the mill. And the rock gets returned, put into tailings, and the metal gets shipped away to be smelted. So here's the water testing. They're doing their environmental testing. And there's that would have started before they got to this stage, and it'll continue through the life of the mine. And for some mines, we'll need to continue after the mine. They're doing road building. Not in this case, it's not as long a road as for the Golden Bear mine, but they're having to build an access road, and it's got to be able to handle large trucks, and it's got to be safe for the people traveling on it as well. Here you can see in mid-flight they're building. They've got a machine shop, it's a machine shop, a stores building, and there's the mill from a bit further away. You see a big crane in there constructing it. They brought on-site accommodations, ACO trailers, because there's the largest workforce for a mine is often there during mine development, because you bring in a lot of contractors, you also have staff, and there's just more different types of activity. Once you actually get the mine up and running, the staff will probably drop by at least 50% to run the mine. Need a dining area, and I would anticipate that at least the TelTan's, their food services company, Patsizi Services, probably bid and may have had the contract for serving the food here. I'm not sure. And this is the tailings impoundment area under development. You can see they've logged quite a large area in here. And the fine grained rock that comes out of their mill will end up being placed in this area in here with a water cover and with a bit of a dam in this area here to keep them in place. So I'm going to talk about the, so with the Golden Bear mine, I've actually mentioned these slides here. My apologies, I've gone through that. But I don't think, sorry, I'm just, I didn't need the first slide, but the TelTan Nation was able to build on what they did with Golden Bear by then working with the Eskay Creek mine. They were fortunate that as Golden Bear mine was sort of coming towards the end of its mine life, the Eskay Creek mine, a very rich gold silver mine in further south, but still in their traditional territory, started up. And they were able to build on what they've been doing with Golden Bear to start up this trucking company called Arrow TelTan Trucking. It's doing road construction, maintenance, and gravel and mine tailing hauling. They also were able to get their Spatsizi remote site services onto the mine site. In 2004, Barrick reported they had 34% TelTan employment at the mine. Up to 2004, the mine had contributed about $93 million in income and donations to the TelTan Nation collectively. They had an apprenticeship program. Interestingly, they also had quarterly meetings with TelTan leadership so that the mine and the TelTan First Nation, the community, were very well connected. And so very good to see. And TelTan has been able to build on that to provide services, not just to mining, but to other areas like forestry and construction and road maintenance, using, again, that as a lever to build their structure. Nisga'a Pacific Ventures, I have a slide here. They were involved in mine development, building, and road construction at the Kitsault project. It's a molybdenum mine. We have some mines in British Columbia that have produced just molybdenum in the past, and Kitsault was a previous mine that was being redeveloped and expanded. And they brought in Nisga'a Nation members who had different experience. They weren't necessarily involved at all in the past with mining, but they had forestry or fishing or construction or road building background. And that made them able candidates to go and work at the Kitsault project. And there was an agreement in place between the company and the Nisga'a Nation on that. They also, I don't know the individuals in this picture, it's not my picture, but there would have been potential for people who were just new to the workplace to work for on the Kitsault project. So I'm going to talk, so one of the things about what I call the metal marathon is that the one thing we know about true marathons is that if it's in a typical marathon, quite a few runners do not finish the race. And I've never run a marathon myself, but I have a daughter-in-law who runs in lots of marathons, and I'm aware of at least one race she didn't finish, but she's actually done quite well with them. Well, if we think about a metal mine marathon, so talking about metal mines, if the prospectors find something and stake it, or maybe a junior company stakes it in early exploration, they might stake, that should be 1,000 rather than 10,000, my mistake. They stake 1,000 properties, then they might find hundreds of mineral exploration properties, and which deserve advanced exploration. Out of that might come several mine development projects, and out of that might just emerge one metal mine. And the progression shows that for metal mines, it's actually very difficult to go out and find something and take it through the sequence, through the life cycle, and get it to be a mine. A very analogy to this would be that it's very difficult to predict which 8-year-old child is really good at hockey, is actually going to make it into the NHL or the WHL or whatever they're calling the Women's Hockey League at this point. It's just, there's so many reasons why that 8-year-old child might not make it to the NHL. And some of them are related to talent, and some of them are related to perhaps maybe breaking your leg and never sort of properly recovering from it to be a professional athlete. Well, there are lots of reasons why what the prospectors found looked interesting, but when they drilled it, it didn't really produce anything, so it didn't get followed up. So these are sort of daunting statistics. Some more Indigenous companies and entrepreneurs. So this is the Tavern Group. It's in Fort St. James. The Mount Milligan mine, it's a copper gold mine northeast of Fort St. James, is not that far from this community, so I'm sure they've done work for them. But they have managed to develop a full fleet of modern equipment by working in various areas, including mine site and infrastructure construction. I suspect a lot of that was probably related to Mount Milligan. But note, they're entrepreneurs. They're not representing their First Nation. They've just said, we're going to start a company. It's going to be Indigenous, but we're just going to be an Indigenous company. Soto's First Nation up in the Northeast. I've done work on coal mines. I just quoted this one project, Wolverine Mine. They did site clearing for Walter Energy 2013. It was a $2 million contract they took on. They also have camp services, which they provide to oil and gas and coal companies and other people in the Northeast. Meek Quarry near Terrace, and sort of right at the boundary between North and South BC, which is developed by the Kitsim First Nation. Here you can sort of see a shot from the air. So the quarry is in here. They have a bit of an industrial park in here, which they're developing, but there's also a rail line that comes in here, which is really critical. So they are providing CN rail with rail ballast, and they're also selling different sizes of aggregate and gravel. And it started quite a number of years ago, with a deal between CN and Kitsim and it's been quite successful. There's a Pavilion limestone quarry. It's kind of interesting because it's on a First Nation reserve in central BC, and you can see here they've been working away on this slope, and you can see some drills going here. They'll put blasting powder into blast. The community is actually not that far away from the quarry, and so it's also got a processing plant that produces lime, and it's operated since 1974. The community members make up most of the operations workforce. The TFN have signed leases with Greymont to continue to operate on the reserve, and they were awarded the first arm's length commercial leases granted in British Columbia under the First Nations Land Management Act, which confers land management powers to the band, so that was an example of a First Nation saying we want to develop something on our reserve and having to work out a process to allow them to be in control of that. Westella aggregates, Penticton Indian Band, is a large gravel pit with a crusher, and they've been doing road maintenance and other things, building off of, I think, some of the funding they've got from their gravel pit. A much smaller gravel pit, and I just stuck this in because the operations don't have to be big to be significant or to be a starting point. And so this is a gravel pit on Vancouver Island, and you can see it's a fairly small operation, but that gravel, and if there's some sand here perhaps, and some gravel in behind, some rock here from a different quarry, that has value and can produce industry. So I mentioned about joint ventures. So the Casca Alliance in north central BC, several of the nations and councils there got involved and made a joint venture with Procom, which is a major mine development and mine operating company. And this is a dated slide, but they were working on the Wolverine Mine when I first started using this slide. And they're, you can see they worked at Caddy, Larange, several different projects, and Procon would, if they developed the right kind of expertise with Casca Alliance employees, then those employees would have the opportunity to work on projects outside of British Columbia as well as inside British Columbia. So getting close to the end here, so I want to talk a little bit about mine closure and reclamation. You may not hear about that as much, and it's actually a very progressive story to hear about for British Columbia. So we've got the mine life cycle, and yes, Indigenous business opportunities associated with this. What do these pictures have in common? And I've given you a hint, so, and you can't answer back to me. They're all from reclaimed mine sites. In actual fact, a lot of these reclaimed mine sites actually have a higher abundance of wildlife initially because they often have restricted access. And this is part of trying to return most mines in British Columbia to the sort of natural original habitat. You can see this is a coal mine, and they've recontoured it and they've been able to revegetate it, but it's still, and there's maybe active mining going on over here still, and so they haven't reclaimed this part. The reclamation is going to vary depending on the site. So modern mine closure, all the buildings are gone, the site has to be safe, you've got to complete the reclamation, you've got to meet the environmental conditions for the site, which would have been in the permits. You have to meet the land use objectives you set out in the original plan for reclamation. You have to satisfy all government regulators, not just the Ministry of Energy and Mines. There are a number of agencies that are going to have involvement with that. It's going to have to be, for some mines, not all, but certainly most, if not all large mines, there'll have to be some monitoring of the site post-closure. And there may need to be ongoing remediation. And I don't have time to talk about that, but that is a concern with some types of mines, is that they may need to require ongoing remediation. And that in BC, we've certainly had some projects. So here's a reclaimed gravel pit. And you can see it's been turned into a vineyard. It's in the lower mainland. And what's essentially happened is they've gone in, they've removed all the surface material, the soil and the glacial till, stockpiled it, mined out the gravel, and then returned probably the till, and then put the soil in the back, and the land, we're sort of looking over the edge of that gravel pit. It extended in the distance to where the trees are. The land has dropped a bit, but it's been returned to its original agricultural use. That's among the easiest ways. Here's a rock dump on Vancouver Island, where they've been able to revegetate it with trees after 12 years, 25 years. I don't have a picture, but now it would be almost 40 years. And obviously the trees would at least be a bit bigger. And so that's another positive way of reclaiming it. One of the better sites for reclamation of a coal mine that I've seen is at Bull Moose in the Northeast. And what was neat was they started reclaiming in this area here while they were still mining further upslope on the side of this mountain. This was a sort of a temporary thing. And then that slope, this slope in here is about where I'm looking in the next photograph. You can see here they've actually recontoured the whole thing to a much more natural. They've replaced a stream that was there originally, and one might think that once it starts to grow a forest on it, that it might be difficult in future to know this site was ever a mine. This is a particularly good orientation of the original mine to enable this kind of reclamation. We're now designing modern mines for reclamation. So this is Mount Milligan. I talked about it earlier near Fort St. James. There you can see the roads for Expiration drilling in 2007. They were talking about developing the mine back then, Terrain Metals, a sort of intermediate sized company who eventually sold it before the mine was started. And you can see here's what they visualized the mine would look like. There's sort of these hills, a slightly different angle in this photograph. So here are the open pits, and here's the tailings impoundment area. And here's what they think of how they would return it to wilderness there would be a swampy area in here, which would help remediate any water coming out of the open pits. You have 2 lakes, and certainly a much better idea about how to reclaim it. So go to SK Creek Mine, which was decommissioned. The TelTan's got involved in doing closing roads. They also had this company called ResCan that they had a joint venture with, and so they had started monitoring water while the mine was open. But once the mine closed in 2008, 2 TelTan teams were going there to monitor the water on a regular basis. And this is particularly cost effective because it's intermittent work, and if people live in the area, it's can be quite effective. So now I'd like to talk about learn your ABCs of mining. This is just some thoughts that I think might help economic development officers relate to this different sector. So increasing Indigenous involvement in mining, a safe and heavy industry, highly regulated in Canada, and the time it takes to find, permit, and build a major mine. So increasing Indigenous involvement, well, we've had employment for ever since there were mines in these jurisdictions, but it took quite a while before we saw approvals for exploration and mine development going to the First Nations and Indigenous communities and having involvement, and that includes sort of ongoing mine operation as well. Indigenous company contracts have become more common, and certainly in BC have become quite a bit more common. Various types of other agreements with companies have become more common, as we saw from that earlier slide. Infrastructure cooperation. Some of the mines are in remote areas, and the power line that was built that goes up to Iskut, goes quite a distance in northern British Columbia. It received government funding because there was both mining and hydroelectric activities in the area, either existing or planned, but it also received support and an indication of desire from Indigenous communities. And then what we're starting to see is shared benefits, like in the income revenue sharing with the BC government, or occasionally ownership. And that's where I think the increasing Indigenous involvement, they present different opportunities. One of the things that I think you need to think about is the TelTan's had a workshop that I attended back in the early 2000s. It's this book here, this Out of Respect. It's not that thick, but they had a workshop, 2-day workshop, and did work around that to decide how they wanted companies to behave and how much did they want mining in their traditional territory. But what I was also impressed was they said, we also need to understand the industry. If we want them to respect us, we also need to respect that, that they have different constraints in how they work, and we need to understand them as well. Safe operations at mines. I've got Saskatchewan data here. It's one of Saskatchewan's safest, lower lost time frequency rating than health or government workers. I mentioned that. The total, and just it is in BC, in Alberta, in British Columbia, in Manitoba, across Canada. It's become a very safe industry through hard work of government agencies, but also just the operators and their associations. I guess if we put it against a backdrop of historical mining, we need to be aware of that. Third letter of the alphabet is T. Takes time to find, permit, build a major mine. These are minimums. A larger mine will take more, but exploration resource definition, if you're lucky, maybe it's 3 years. Mine permits in a Canadian context, 2 to 3 years, longer for major mines. Then you have construction, and again, 2 years would be pretty quick for any sort of significant mine. But you put that against the backdrop of a window of opportunity when you can get the investment funds available, that starts to become a period of time where you want to make sure the money's still there to build it. And so with a broad window of opportunity, you're going to get mine development. A small window of opportunity, you can slow it down, you can stall it, or it may stop and then have to restart. There are good industry overviews provided by the Geological Survey of British Columbia, and they're available online. And where there's information sources which we will be distributing after the workshop, but or I guess posting to the Cando website. Oops, that was supposed to take us to questions, but anyway, we want questions now. Carmel, please.
So does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Any questions? Hi, Bert.
Hi, Dave. I just wanted to mention that I think there's 2 granite deposits. One's at Kitson Calum, and they're huge. It surrounds our furthest village, Gingold.
Yeah.
It's that granite down river where it meets the ocean is. It's really good. But I also wanted to mention too, our nation, through our president, they publicly announced about a week ago that the Nisga'a Nation is moving forward on the development of an LNG facility at Nesoga Gulf. So we're working with 2 investors on it.
Good for you.
Yeah, because that line was already done by TransCanada and Spectra Energy from northeastern BC all the way down to Rupert. So all the tidal waters and everything else are all done. That's the one that was supposed to go to Lalo Island outside of Port.
Yeah.
So just a couple comments.
Yeah, sorry, no, I appreciate it, Bert. And it's good you mentioned about the granite quarry. It sounds like it's pretty close to tidewater, if I interpret it correctly. And was another quarry that was suggested for further north towards Stewart, which was again on the ocean. So crushed rock and aggregate and stone, you transfer it by water, you can take it quite long distances with much lower costs. So that's a case of the infrastructure can make a big difference in making that economic over a granite deposit that sits near Smithers or somewhere like that.
Yeah, and then I had another question. You know the mining that's done up in the Yukon, and then they upgraded the bridge that crosses the Nass River as you go to Stewart. I heard through the grapevine that some of their out of those mines were going to be trucked all the way down to Stewart to be shipped out by the Stewart Road Port by Arctic Construction.
Yeah, I don't know the details on that, but sometimes with a mine, you're not producing enough of your own metal concentrate. That could be coming from the mine that's right just south of the Yukon border there, and it's a lead zinc. They'd be producing a silver lead zinc concentrate, and so a mine would prefer normally to concentrate it on site using a mill. But if it's a smaller mine, you can do two things. One of which is you just say, well, we can't afford the investment, but it's rich enough right now to ship it to Stewart and ship it overseas to an existing facility. Or you can say, we're going to ship it for a period of time while we build up, get enough investment, and we're convinced that this deposit will be supplying enough ore. If it's what I call the midway, I forget there's a new name for that deposit. They've been doing they did a lot of exploration this summer, that I do know, and they're finding a lot of new zones. And so if the deposit gets bigger, suddenly that changes how they approach it. It's the same way, yeah. So it sometimes the resource is only economic in sort of without a mill. That's pretty uncommon for metals, but it can happen that way. And it's good that for that part of BC that even if you have the mill, you're going to have to ship most metal concentrates are bound for smelters in Asia. So having that kind of infrastructure there makes the mines in that area more economic, but it also is more environmentally friendly. You're not shipping, it's much more environmentally to be shipping by water than in trucks.
We also had some comments from Jonathan Kruger. Did you want to turn your camera on? And
sure, let's hear from Jonathan if he's comfortable with that. Hi there, good to see you.
Good to see you guys. I'm sorry I'm late. I was in another meeting, but I wanted to be here, and it was a really good presentation from what I caught at the end there. And I seen that you showed a video of some PowerPoint presentation on the Westella aggregates, and I just said some comments there saying that I was the chief back in the day when Westella aggregates was just starting to become successful, and now it generates from $6 to $8 million a year in gross revenue for the Penticton Indian Band. And after you pay all the insurance and the gas and the work here, we're netting about just over $2 million a year. So, and that goes back to the community.
Yeah, a delight to talk to you. That's really good, because that's one of the examples I've had for longer. I was aware of, I've known about that for a number of years, but I've never tried to go look at the pit, which I don't know why, because my daughter and son-in-law and their daughter live in Penticton, so I should drive by and look at it sometime. But that's a great story. And in the Alberta webinar I did this morning, I talked about sand and gravel, because it's spread out through the 4 provinces and it's in sort of rural and almost sometimes suburban areas. I think it represents a good starter way to get into a project. So it's neat to hear what a success story has happened in Penticton. Yes.
I'd also like to share that we diversified the company from a gravel company to a gravel and trucking company, and we're now the largest trucking company in the South Okanagan. And we also diversified from the gravel pit. And this is important when you talk about mining, is the diversification that you can do from just starting from a mine. We also created a utilities company. So when we started doing joint ventures on housing developments, because we had a gravel pit, we were building the roadways,
Yeah.
the sewer, the water, the shallow utilities, the fiber optic lines. We created all the sidewalks, all the LED lights, because of the mine that we have.
Yeah, no, and those are two excellent points, because what I may not have made it strongly enough, like with the TelTans, with the certain extent, in some ways with the Nisga'a, but with some of the First Nations, the mining ventures had enough economic activity to get a good 5-year, 8-year, 10-year start on building a company. The mine may close at that point, but you've built up the infrastructure, you have the expertise, you have the equipment, and then you can shift to maybe, if you're lucky, another mine like the TelTans did, but perhaps more likely other things, because I think on the side ahead, I think you guys do snow removal, and you've done a variety of things, but you had two critical things. You had expertise, the nucleus have expertise, and in your case, for what you're doing, you had the equipment, and so that allowed you to sort of diversify. And that's why I think one of the reasons that mining is attractive is, okay, maybe all mines are going to be mined out eventually, but they can be very good starting points for Indigenous communities and opportunities. So it's great to hear from you. And as I said, I had that slide for a number of years and a number of presentations, but I never had a chance to talk to somebody who actually worked on or started the operation. So that's great.
I also wanted to put it, why I'm here is because I work for Sodexo, and we actually do the camp services on the mines, like Mount Milligan, where we have a lot of Indigenous people from the First Nations communities in Fort St. James and our partners in McLeod Lake Indian.
Yes. Yeah.
So we do the cooking and we do the cleaning, and there's a lot of jobs there as well, and really good revenue sharing and capacity building and training.
I guess I should have had that slide in there as well, but that's good to hear. Yeah, no, Mount Milligan is one of the more recent large open pit copper gold mines that was built in BC. And so what we've seen with the industry is, over time, as they've seen what other companies have done and how they've been able to interface with First Nations, I think they've become, well, better partners, certainly more knowledgeable partners, but also it's sort of opened their minds to sort of more opportunities from their point of view. And so I'm really pleased to hear that, but it's sort of what I would expect from that particular mining operation, but didn't know that the details there.
You bet. Yes, I know Art Mercer. He's a good buddy. I like him. He's an awesome guy. Him and his son. And hello, Mike McGee. I see Mike McGee out in there in the crowd there too. So Mike McGee was worked for PIB back in the day too. So it's good to see his name out there.
Yeah, and what I would say, I don't know on the Indigenous side, but from my knowledge, well, I do know it from the Indigenous side with some of the people like Jerry Asp, who I've learned a lot from and done some workshops with, and is a good friend. Like TelTan miners didn't just end up in BC or even in sort of Alberta, BC. Around the Vietnam War, some of them were working in northern United States mining coal, and there's other parts to that story. But yeah, it's you need that opportunity to get sort of that good whack of employment and experience under your belt, and you don't need to stay in mining, but it's one way to sort of get you set off on a career. However, whether it's a sand and gravel pit or it's a metal mine or whatever.
You bet. The TelTans are amazing people, and watching them and hearing their stories and seeing Jerry get honored at the AME there last year, I think it was.
And at PDAC, he got recognized nationally, I think 3 years ago now. So
yeah,
so
the TelTans know a lot about mining, and they can definitely share their story to a lot of First Nations across Canada.
Yeah. Well, the Nisga'a and the TelTan are two of the main First Nations sharing the Golden Triangle in northern BC, and it's seen a lot of historical mining, but it's attracted worldwide attention as a place to find copper and gold and silver deposits. And so they've been able to build the experience, and I do think, you know, I like the fact that they sat down, and I was involved with the discussions, which I appreciated, and they were not just about mining, they were about how does this affect our communities, because there were healthcare workers who were involved in that workshop saying, well, if the mining comes, that's going to bring more drugs into our communities, and we're really concerned about that, and it was clearly something to be concerned about. But as the conversation went on, they also realized if they didn't have jobs for their young, take young men they were talking about at that time, but their young, you know, the younger population, well, what's going to happen? A job really gives, you know, takes younger people forward. You know, if they're sort of getting out of school, it's one way of sort of helping setting them on the right path. And so it was interesting to see that the challenges, because again, that's another concern about mining. It changes some of the people who are coming into your community. And so I was very privileged to be part of that conversation.
So we still have about 10 minutes left, but I did want to just remind everybody that this session is being recorded and will be available afterwards for those of you who have joined us late, and that there will be a follow-up email with a survey link. And at the end of the week, we will draw 2 winners for a chance to win $400 each. Yeah, was there any more questions or comments for Dave or? All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much for another excellent presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks, Carmel, for moderating.
In
Thanks,
the
Paul.
chat.
I do.
Oh,
have
in the chat.
Yes, we have
Good.
one from Cindy Collins. Not all of us First Nations are capable or in place of starting up an aggregate mine and business. How long does it take to get permits, and startup costs are how much, and is there available funds to get started?
I guess several questions there. Yeah, at the same time, I'm saying they're smaller mines, and Jonathan can confirm this, what I'm going to say, or maybe comment afterwards. They're still regulated. There's still a question is, can I build this aggregate mine here and actually have enough customers to buy the supply? There might be somebody in the same neighborhood who can actually undercut you, at least initially, with their prices, and it'll be hard to get your place in the market. So there are a lot of business aspects. So that's why I think a lot of First Nations might start more with sort of joint ventures with some company that has in-house expertise. So you can, as long as you can build a trusting relationship, you can work together. Again, I think it depends on the size of the band and what coffers you have and what expertise you have internally. Yeah, so permitting a sand and gravel pit is, as long as it's sort of in the right place. You don't want to be right beside a fish-bearing stream. You know, there are going to be places where that sand and gravel pit is not going to get mined because you have to protect the environment. But it's still going to take time, and you're going to need to do your research first, and it's going to require you. And I would think for your community, as an economic development officer, you might want to look. Remember, I had that slide, Indigenous community involvement. You might want to say, well, is there a way to find employment opportunities as the first step? It's one way of getting educated people into our community who have some of that, maybe some at least related background. Or can we perhaps join our partners in doing some, maybe working in aggregate operation somewhere else? I mean, I just heard about the Penticton Indian Band. Sounds like they may have had some of their workforce coming and going. So maybe it means that a couple of your younger staff, younger people in your community have to go and live in Penticton or go live in, outside of Vancouver or something where there is an operation where they can actually get some experience, practical experience. It's I guess partially what I'm saying, even though sand and gravel pits require a smaller investment and they use equipment that you might already be using on your reserve or in the local community, it still is a significant threshold to get involved. So I entirely understand that. So you need to think of ways, what are sort of simple steps that get me towards it, but you think about it as a goal that's it's 5 years ahead out there for your community, because you don't have the same knowledge base, you don't have the same sort of resources to do it. So you need to look for other things. So I would start with employment and sort of think about, okay, what are things that we can do while we aim for something that's a bit more ambitious. Jonathan, do you want to comment?
Yeah, you're right. It's location and it's the need for selling the product in that area. And you have to talk about how big you want how big it's going to be. So when we first started, we rented a crusher to get us by, and then eventually we, because depending on the market, we purchased it. We started purchasing our own trucks and purchasing bulldozers, excavators, so on and so forth, all the equipment that we needed. And then when it started going really well, we started looking at, well, how can we diversify and create more job opportunities and more business? What can we create? So your community, if you're going to start a gravel pit in your band, and we're also looking as a nation at mines within our territory and applying those people to go to those places as well. And we've had training programs. We worked with colleges on getting people that these guys that have these, well, not guys, these people that have these equipment companies that teach people how to use machines.
Yeah.
We brought companies in there right on site to teach them, band members, not only from our Penticton Indian band, but all the band members throughout the South Okanagan. We invited everybody, whoever wanted to get in there, because once you get up and running, you can't just rely on your band members to keep the business going. You got to try to get as many Indigenous people working there, and then we even hire people from town. So we have to keep it running.
Mm-hmm. One thing, and Jonathan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mentioned that with metal mines, for every 1,000, not 10,000, every 1,000 properties that are staked, maybe only one of it will actually become a producing metal mine. I suspect for every I don't know, every 10 aggregate pits that are started, for one reason or other, some of them are going to fail. Not all of them are going to be successful. And I tend to think that if we were go to take the Indian band and say, okay, you could probably tell me 2 or 3 people who made that a success in the first 5 or 6 years. You know, that there were probably some key individuals, as there are with other businesses, other organizations, that bring the drive and the commitment and are prepared to learn to make it happen. So it's not enough, I think, to just sort of say, well, we can do a sand and gravel quarry. You got to do the research, but you do need to be ready to have some leadership there that are on site who are going to make it happen.
Yes, we had we reorganized our band and created an economic development corporation, and we separated the business from the politics. That was the most successful thing that we had to do.
Sorry, I just wanted to be mindful of the time. We do have 2 minutes left. So Dave, did you have any final comments? I'm so sorry, Jonathan.
Okay, it's all good.
No, I just appreciate the questions and the discussion we had at the end. And
in the chat.
Cindy, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself if you wanted to say a few comments.
Okay, I will bring forth both of them. And the first one, I was saying that with all the mining, is it or can it be proposed that a percentage be automatically set aside for First Nations, kind of like the Fracasa? And the other one is the talk about starting up small or on your own land and stuff like that. Well, we unfortunately had a sand removal project from an outside company. And as far as we're concerned, we got shafted out of that. We lost our memories of the hill. We used to call it the hill. The whole thing was pretty well flattened, and all the trucks and everything that came in and out of there, we're sure we got shafted out of that.
Yeah, so two questions there, and I think I think maybe there's a minute left here. First question is, that's sort of a political, I'm a consulting geologist, a political discussion. Right now, BC took a big step forward saying that if there's a new mine going onto a traditional territory, we will look at revenue sharing with the 1, 2, or 3 sometimes, but First Nations that have a traditional territory that overlaps with the mine. But it needs to be negotiated. And it's related to that mine development, because you have a source of revenue that can produce obviously taxes to help govern, to provide services to all British Columbians, but can also provide revenue to the First Nations. So that you're asking a broader question, and you need to ask some politicians about that. With respect to, I mean, whoever you work with, you want to be working with good people. Mining is about removing material. Sometimes it's underground, and so you don't see the impact as much. Sometimes it's smaller volumes, but aggregate is right on the surface, so it is going to affect your local topography. And I guess I think it's unfortunate. That's where you need to be informed. And that's why I want economic development officers to voice concerns and sort of be there to help guide their community to say, well, have you really thought, we're going to, they mine it. It's, even if they sort of do it the right way, and I'm not saying they didn't do it the right way, but it's going to change the way things look. And we've been used to it like this. And I suspect the Penticton Indian Band, they had an area that was sort of more suitable than it sounds like your area was, but that's my answer.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we're at time, and I'd like to again thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and a big thank you to Natural Resource Canada for funding our project, and Dave Lefebvre for all of his hard work and research and delivering this excellent presentation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Bert. Take care. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
see you, Carmel.
See you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Paul.